all we have to do is look to what Jesus did, right? I mean, he wasn't so angry at the world and the non-believers. He was really compassionate, loving to them, and he cared about them. He would give them warnings, but because he loved. Who is he really critical to? Who is he relentlessly criticizing? The Pharisees, those who claim to be the religious followers. So there was that. There was, we go out there, we try to win over the world, but we forget who our audience is. We've got, as one of my teachers always used to say, our audience is one, right? Like Curly in City Slickers. One thing we have to worry about is God. No matter what we do, when we engage, they told us there's two things. We either build up believers or bring other people into the kingdom. If we're not doing one of those two things, we're just doing it for us, basically. So I really took a lot away from it, and he'll probably recap and go on to the next phase. This will be the second part. So let's just open up, with a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for how great you are, and please remind us every day of that you are the only audience we care about. Father, we get so angry with what's going on in the world today. We don't know how to address politics because we're clouded in this fleshly body, this sinful world. We just are saved only by your grace, and Lord, by your grace we ask that you guide us in the discussions. We bring and equip believers to you and compel Christianity to those who do not yet know you. Father, let us remember to love, because as angry as we get, we have to follow the footsteps of Jesus, who loved those who may not have agreed. Without love, we're no different than the world. Father, let Dave be empowered by your Spirit as he speaks today, and let the message carry forward so that we actually act it out in our lives. In Jesus' name. So last week was, why not engage in politics? So are we not to engage at all, Dave, based on what you told us? No. All right, well, not true. Hand it up to you.
All right. So after I did all my slides, I was thinking this morning, and I don't have enough to do a study on. Maybe it's a topic for a future one to further delve into. But if you think about the contrast between the book of Jonah and the book of Nehemiah, that's really the struggle that we all have. Louder?
Oh, there's a mic there.
I'll just try to talk louder. So the struggle we have as Christians is whether we're going to be Jonah or whether we're going to be a Nehemiah. And just to recap, everybody knows that Jonah was given a command by God and didn't want to do it. So he took a ship the opposite direction of where he's supposed to go, and he got swallowed by the whale. Nehemiah, on the other hand, was a captive in a foreign city, and he had heard through the news that his city, Jerusalem, had fallen, and the city walls had been crumbled and the gates had fallen through. And he fell down on his knees and he prayed for days and days. And it was months of prayer and supplication before he finally was, of asking forgiveness for the sins of his people and everything else. And then he was given the opportunity with the power that was with him to go and rebuild the walls and the gates of Jerusalem. And I think that's a much better model for us as Christians than we realize. We take it for granted that we live in a Christian country, but I think most of us realize now that we don't. We don't really live in a Christian country anymore. I think the foundation of the country is on Christian roots. A lot of Christian values were imbued. The very rights we have are derived from a Christian understanding of the universe. But that's not the world we live in now. And if you speak like a Christian and speak biblically in the public marketplace, you're going to be laughed or chased out and thrown. You're going to throw rotten tomatoes at you. So I think we have to have a little more humble and patient, long view of how things are. Sometimes it demands us to act sooner, but I think we got to be careful. And that's the constant battle we're going to have. So do I have control, or is there anything I can flip the slide, or do you want to still flip over? So I'm gonna have the same goals this time as last time. I'm hoping to give you guys something to think about when it comes to politics and how it intersects your faith and how they're not separate. When you're dealing with politics, we're talking about politics, when you're watching news about politics, you can't put Jesus in a box over in the corner and forget about him. And your actions are, and the way you behave, have eternal consequences. So I'm going to challenge you to take it seriously. Even your just casual observation of watching the news, you're putting information into your head. You're feeding your soul. What are you feeding it with? Are you feeding it with a bunch of angry people yelling at each other? Or are you feeding it with, I mean, do you have the filter on? Do you have your guard up when you're watching that stuff? Because sometimes you need to watch this stuff to be informed. And perhaps this is a warning shot to some and a word of encouragement to others, and somewhere in between. I think what usually happens in my experience is that when you try to follow the biblical teachings of Jesus and God in the Bible, you get both. You're both not doing enough and you're doing too much at the same time. And it's different than you expected. So I like these quotes. I put them up last time. I'll keep using them. So in the context of all my warnings, I'm putting this up. We have lived in a free country. And for us to sit on our hands and not go out and vote is a tragic waste of an opportunity. And there are literally hundreds of millions of Christians in the world that will never get the right to vote. And for us to not even show up at the polling places is like throwing a ham sandwich away when there's a starving man across the street. So I'm going to throw a couple more quotes up there to get us started. And this is a really good verse to pray on before you start in an argument or you start reading stuff. See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Christ. That's a really good verse to guard your heart when you're dealing with politics, right? There's a lot of arguments out there, and they start talking about the details of this versus that and right versus wrong on a particular social issue or a particular political bill that's up for vote or a particular candidate. Do not have a ring in your nose. Oxen have rings in their nose. You see the old Ferdinand the Bull cartoon had a ring. Anybody here know what the ring in the nose was for?
Control.
What's that?
Control.
Yeah. The nose is an incredibly sensitive part of the animal, and you can have a 2,000-pound animal do whatever you want by grabbing that ring and tugging it. And it's a sign of slavery. It's a sign of servitude. And when we accept Christ, we have the opportunity to take the ring out of our nose. Do it. Take it out. Don't get pulled along by what the world is going to challenge you or entice you to do. Take the ring out. Don't react. Take a deep breath and decide how you're going to react and do it on purpose and do it the right way. There's a long one, but Colossians is pretty good. I skipped ahead on Steve and Gino's study on Colossians. Skipped ahead on the book a little bit. Therefore, what's it there for? He's talking about you made a new creation, right? So therefore, consider the members of your earthly body as dead to immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and greed. Does that sound like the news to you? Which amounts to idolatry. That's what we talked about last time. When you put your faith in something other than God, that's a form of idolatry. For it is because of these things that the wrath of God will come upon the sons of disobedience. And in them you also once walked, when you were living in them. But now you also put them all aside. Anger, wrath, malice, slander, and abusive speech from your mouth. I'm guilty of all those things, by the way. Do not lie to one another, since you laid aside the old self with its evil practices, and have put on a new self, who is being renewed to a true knowledge according to the image of the one who created him. A renewal in which there is no distinction between Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave and freeman, but Christ is all and in all. And I think that's another passage that we should keep in our hearts and our context. You know, I didn't finish my table of contents. So this is going to be very effective, very helpful. There should be about 5 or 6 more of those. All right, well, I'm going to start with a review of last time a little bit. So the main points from last time are, remember why we're here. We're not here to get Ted Cruz elected. We're not here to make sure Hillary goes to jail or doesn't get elected, or Bernie Sanders gets elected. We're not here to save America. We're not here to even make America successful, because at the end of the day, God doesn't care about that. God cares about saving sinners. So when we look at the world, like Dan said a minute ago, I'll just repeat the logic trail, right? If God is who he says he is, and he wrote the Bible, and the Bible is true, then there's really only 2 types of people in this world. There's people that are lost, and there's people that are saved. And if that's true, then there's only 2 legitimate types of conversations, 2 legitimate types of relationships we can have with every single person walking this earth. We're either encouraging the faith of the saints, or we're trying to rescue the lost sinners. And everything we do has to be thought of in that context, otherwise you're just wasting your time and you're doing something that you want for your own pride, or your own misplaced faith in some idol. So the next one we talked about was anger management. And I don't think we have a right to be angry at anything except for that which profanes the name of the Lord. You know, people talk about righteous anger. Well, there's none righteous but one, right? There's only one righteous thing in the universe, and that's God himself and his son Jesus Christ. And so if we're angry, that's because we're disappointed that something that we wanted didn't go our way. And we're pissed off and we're pounding the table and blah, blah, blah. That's because you put your faith in that thing. You shouldn't. So, again, faith and trust equals idols. Our interactions with others have eternal consequences. And I'm just going to throw this, I don't think I laid it out in the slides very well, so I'm going to just go on a tangent on this fourth point here. When you're having a discussion with somebody about a political matter, it could be your friend and you agree, it could be someone that you disagree with, it could be civil, it could be whatever. The person you're arguing with or discussing it with might not be the audience. Every single person that can hear your conversation, every single person that can see your body language, and every single person that person interacts with and tells about you is the audience that you have no idea the ripple effect that words you say that come out of your mouth have outside. You have no idea. I can tell you, being in a fairly public, I mean, it was online, but a fairly public display of making arguments politically, I was continually surprised at the people that I thought would never read it, read what I wrote and had a comment on it. Sometimes that was good, sometimes it was bad.
Where was that? Was that on?
Online.
Variety of things. I did a year and a half of online forums arguing for the existence of God, and I did a bunch of political stuff on Facebook and Twitter and all kinds of stuff like that. And I was always surprised at who read. I'd get a comment, "Oh, that was really great what you said the other day." There's probably a bunch of people that didn't like what I said that didn't say anything. So, was I a good witness for Jesus, or was I just making sure I was right? Well, I'm telling you right now, it's probably the second one. So that's something to think about. And the last one we're going to explore a little deeper. We're going to go back into that thought of the devil's playground. Politics is the place where the powers of this world compete for control. It is not a Christian environment. It's not our native place to be. So if you're walking in there thinking everybody's happy and good and they're all Christians and they're friendly, you are dangerously naive and you're going to walk into a buzzsaw. And I've seen it many times where good-hearted, well-meaning Christians walk into the buzzsaw and they have no idea what hit them. And they end up looking foolish on national television, or they, you know, it's bad. So I'm going to tell you the stuff that I've witnessed and seen and experienced myself. And if you haven't seen it, then you might be surprised by some of this. But I'd say you have to be prepared to have people that you love and respect say horrible things to you and disagree. You might say the most innocuous, normal statement of fact, and you get somebody wagging their finger in your face yelling at you. You got to be prepared for childish taunts and rants that have no basis in logic or reason. Start Be prepared for relentless schoolyard jeering from people that you previously thought were dignified and had gravitas. Grown men and women that you thought were respectable positions in society acting like children. Be prepared to lose all faith in people. That's what we want to do, right? We don't want to have faith in people. We want to have faith in Jesus. You lose it. You let it all go. Accept the world as it is, not as you wish it to be, and let go of the idol of this world. Only then are you going to be able to participate in a political environment without getting yourself sullied and dirty. Okay? But we have a new hope. We got the secret plans to the Death Star, right? We know how it ends. We got the book. So we don't have to be mad. We don't have to worry. And the weapons we have is love, hope, and faith, right? It's kind of disappointing, right? We wanted to have that argument that shut everybody up and made everyone world all better. Magic wand that we could wave. But in order to push those things and exhibit those things in a toxic, waste-dumping political discourse, you need to have courage and perseverance, and you have to have all the rest of the fruit of the Spirit. And it's hard. It's not easy. So I want to just quickly run down some salient points in the book of Daniel. Has anybody read the book of Daniel, like done a Bible study on it? A couple of you? I thought Daniel was a pretty neat guy, and he is the perfect study of how you perform or act in a marketplace where you're not in control, but you can still have great influence by staying true to who you are, not being combative, but still holding fast to your principles. And as a young man, of course, he's raised up and he refused to eat the meat sacrificed to idols, so he ate vegetables only, and then they actually stayed healthy and all the other kids got weak, so he got selected for the very aggressive position, right? As a child, as a young man, let's see. Yeah, so the king basically said, all right, all you diviners, all you conjurers, I have a dream and you have to interpret it for me. And they said, well, what's the dream? Well, we'll interpret it. He says, no. If you really have power, you don't need me to tell you what the dream is. You're just going to tell me what your interpretation is. And none of you can do it, so he declared he's going to kill them all. Well, I have compassion and heart. And he says, no, don't kill them. Because no man can know that, but I, worship of God, that can. And so he prayed that night, and God gave him the vision. Because he had faith. I'm not sure where Daniel was, that's the big mystery, but his three buddies got thrown in the furnace, right? They didn't burn up. Because, I don't know if you've read that, but what they said to the king, said, you know what? My God can make it so I won't get hurt. But even if I burn up, you have no power over him, and I don't care. They got thrown in the furnace, and they didn't burn up. And then later, after the next king came by, Daniel interpreted the words that nobody else could interpret. He came in and told him what the words meant, and the guy understood what it meant. The handwriting was on the wall. That phrase comes from this right here. And finally, as an old man in the lion's den, cast in the lion's den for refusing to bow down to the big idol and stop praying. And I think you can have a weight and an authority in the marketplace of ideas if you are calm walking through the storm. I don't think you can if you're a participant in the fight with the ball of fists. And if you're angry and you're yelling, no one's gonna respect you, no one's gonna listen to you. But if you are calm in the storm, you're gonna have an authority in that marketplace.
I just think it's really cool that Daniel got to be part of the foreshadowing of the Lion and the Lamb in Revelation.
I agree.
Me too. I'd say it's pretty instructive to think about Daniel's context. You know, I mean, you could imagine the situation he's in. He's not from Babylon, right? You know, imagine if Mexico were to come in and take us captive and down to Mexico, and we would serve in the palaces of their kings, and wouldn't we be tempted to be political and do little things to undermine? You know, I always like to think about that. And then you look at his actions, thinking what he could have been doing. You know, he really gives us a good example.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I thought Daniel was a really good, this is kind of the how-to. Some of the how-to is knowing where in the Bible to look for instruction. Daniel and Nehemiah are really good places to go. So now the question of the day, right? Politics is so filthy, should we engage at all? And a lot of Christians say no. And the evidence I have for that is there's a lot of Christians that don't show up at the polling booth on election day. They stay home. They're not interested. They don't want to be involved because it's so nasty. But my answer is complicated. And there's always a difference between group conversation versus an individual. There's a group ethic, there's an individual ethic. And what is right for a group of people or a nation to do is not necessarily the same moral ethic for an individual in circumstance. And I'll go into more of that later. But aggregately, Christians should absolutely be involved in politics. They should absolutely speak into the microphone and have an opinion about the things of the day. But whether you individually should or not is something between you and God, and you need to make sure you're right with it before you do it. I guess that's in a nutshell, what I'm kind of talking about today. And I'm hopefully going to give you some ideas on how to make sure you are ready. So, yes, we should. All of these things were informed by a Christian faith and wouldn't exist today without it. You think about Schindler's List. The guy was moved by against all his interests, against all his self-interest. He sacrificed everything to save as many people as he could. And he wept that he couldn't save more. Right? Underground Railroad, abolition of slavery, hospitals. Hospitals were started by Christians during the Crusades. They didn't exist before. It was the mercy of God and the heart for people seeing the world through God's eyes and not ours. Schools were created by Christians. I mean, yeah, religious schools, but the idea of an educated humanity, I mean, that's definitely driven by a biblical understanding of the world. In this country, debtor's prison versus bankruptcy law. Bankruptcy law was born of a mercy, taking the dumb book, the foundation of common law, and applying a little more mercy to the concept. Usually, if you couldn't pay your debt, you literally went to prison. And they had a table of how many years or whatever it was to pay off your debt. You didn't accomplish anything, just shame people, right? Bankruptcy law is much more forgiving. It's literally forgiveness of debt. The common law itself was Alfred the Great trying to take Roman law and apply the mercy of Christ to it. The concept of free market versus mercantilism, where you had men that were free because they were made in the image of God, versus mercantilism, where you have everything controlled by a small number of people. And just the very notion of having a free soul, being free to worship, and all the things that we talk about in our Constitution. I mean, all those things are informed by a Christian understanding of the world. And without the Christian understanding of the world, a lot of these things wouldn't happen. We'd be living in these tyrannies that are awful we all read about. Part 2, elections in this country are determined by single-digit percentages. Almost all the significant ones are. Christians came out and voted for us, they transformed the country in one election. It's not a big number. We got transgender bathrooms, we got abortion on demand, we got pornographic culture everywhere we go. There's half-naked people, no matter where you go. Our current political discourse is intolerable. You can't even. Nobody who wants to be in that. Why don't we? Well, I think it's cowardice, to be honest with you, and not being prepared. I don't think our churches have been good at preparing us for the fight. I don't think we have historically been making disciples in our churches. We haven't been making disciples. We've been going to church and phoning it in and sitting in the pew on Sunday and go about our normal life. We have church in a little box on Sunday, and then we go out in the world and act the way we're going to act without a single thought to whether what we're doing is that's pleasing to God. I'm not saying that to everybody, I'm speaking aggregate now, so. But we're called to boldly proclaim the gospel. We're called to a life of courage under trying circumstances. We're called to suffer if need be for His name. We're called to a higher purpose than that. We're not called to sit in our little bubble, little Christian bubbles, and pretend the world's okay in our little corner of it. Jesus sat with the prostitutes and tax collectors and went where the people were hurting the most and went and taught them and healed them. He made a difference in the world. Todd brought up the Samaritan woman at the well last time, and I thought that was a great example of, reaching a lost type of scenario that we should have a heart for, to see the world through the eyes that God sees. But no, we shouldn't engage in politics. If you're not ready for the abuse and the disappointment, you still have some rose-colored glasses on. You need to maybe spend a little more time simmering. If you're still clinging to faith in humans as being basically good, and we can all intellectually, last time everybody said, oh no, we don't believe that, but do you? I think most people still cling to that. I think that's the default setting for popular culture, that people are essentially good. And intellectually you can say, no, I don't believe that, but think about it when you react to people. Most people, that is the default setting. If you haven't actively got in there and rooted out your operating system and replaced it with the Bible, that's what you think. That's how you're going to react to things. If you assume people are fallen sinners as a default, you're going to have a much better time and not being disappointed when they fall down and do bad things. If you have faith in our government, I'm a patriot. I was born a little war hero, patriot guy. Grew up on army bases overseas. I love our country. I think that the Constitution of the United States is the finest political document ever created by man. The problem is it's created by man, so it's going to fail. There's no politician that can save this country. Not one. I don't care who they are, where they come from, what party they're in. There's no politician that can save this country, because this is a country governed by we, the people. That's our government. Which means the grassroots, the we, the people, have to make the change. Politicians are just their followers. They're not the leaders. People give them way too much credit. Is there a political party that actually lives by its stated beliefs, the party platform? I know the Republican Party doesn't. Democrats are probably closer to living by it, but it's just one I just don't agree with. But I don't think they live by theirs either. I think they go with whatever is going to get them the most power quickly, and I think they all do. Or a financial theory, free market capitalism, socialism. Those you can't put your faith in that. Does anybody have any faith in the objectivity of reporters? Anyone? If you do not know the facts about which topic you are about to speak, you shouldn't engage. If you do not know the arguments of the people that you disagree with and understand their point of view before you open your mouth, you probably should keep your mouth shut, because you're going to be surprised at what comes out of their mouth. And you're not going to react. And if there's a bunch of people watching, you're going to look like a fool. And I'm not worried about you looking like a fool, except for if you have a cross around your neck and you're claiming to be a Christian, you're sitting out there and saying, I'm a Christian, and I just think that blah, 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 blah comes out of your mouth, and then they make you look like an idiot. It's just going to feed the meme that Christians are a bunch of dumb knuckle-dragger idiots. Well, we don't really need that meme out there. It's not really helping anybody. It's not saving anybody. And it's not encouraging any other Christians to step out and engage the culture, right? If any of this above hits home, you need to sit this round out and do some more homework and soul searching. But imagine a Christian community powered by their faith, informed by the facts, inspired by the Holy Spirit, confident in their place, adding sweetness to the culture with the power of the gospel. That will transform this country. You see that happening, you're going to see big tent revival happening. That's the power. It only takes that to happen. It's only a few percentage points to make a huge difference. And I think many attempts from Family Research Council to a a bunch of other organizations have been really pushing for the last 10 years or more, just how do we get more Christians to vote? Well, I think we need to prepare. I think we need to get better at our Bible studies. We need to get better at our relationships with God. And I think it will naturally flow. It's like the tree planted by the streams of water in Psalm 1, right? I think you feed your soul with soul food, and what comes out, the fruit's going to bear in its own season. It's going to happen. But the point is that we have to obey what the Bible is telling us, and not the playbook designed by men that are fallen. So now we come to the fancy ride. I came across this term when I was reading a book that I actually disagree with, so I'm going to take his term and I'm going to twist it around. There's a guy who's a Jesuit priest. He wrote a book, and I can't remember the name of it. But he basically analyzed the death of Jesus on the cross, and analyzed, and he was questioning whether it actually happened. It was a foolish book. But he came across this tensile dialectic, and he referred to it as a combat between faith and reason. And I don't see that. I think it's between our two natures and the challenge that Christian faith has for us. So let's break it down. Everybody knows what tensile is. Tensile strength, and it is an engineering background, so forgive me, but anything that's in tension is something that's being pulled apart, right? So a string, a tensile strength test is how much force you can pull on a string before it snaps, or pull on whatever it is. That's how you measure tensile strength. So when you talk about tensile, you're talking about things that are being pulled apart. In the dialectic, I put the whole thing up here because they all have a little bit on there. So discussion and reasoning by dialogue is a method of intellectual investigation, specifically the Socratic techniques of exposing false beliefs and eliciting truth. The Platonic investigation of eternal ideas. The logic of fallacy. The Hegelian process of change in which a concept or its realization passes over into and is preserved and fulfilled by its opposite. Also the critical investigation of this process, and so on and so forth. I'll just let it go. But I think we have two natures. We have a lion and a lamb, right? Jesus was a lion and the lamb, depending on the circumstance. And I think we need to pay attention to when it is appropriate for us to act in both those scenarios. And this is a struggle. This is something we've got to wrestle with our entire lives. I'll give you an example. If someone hits me, I have to turn the other cheek, right? It's Matthew. But if someone gets hit, the government's job is to make sure that person that's going out hitting people gets incarcerated. Both are true. Both have biblical references. It's not my job to ball up my fist and go after the guy who's walking around hitting people. It's the government's job. Right? The government does not bear the sword for nothing. There's a reason. The government is designed to handle evil in the society we live in. But we're not to ball our fist up and strike as an individual moral ethic. So this is the lion and the lamb type of concept. They're both true at the same time, but in slightly different ways in different contexts. With the lion, we have the sword, like I mentioned just before that, the armor of God, be bold and run the race, Jesus overturned the money changers, all those kind of things. The lamb, we have the fruit of the Spirit, the Beatitudes, the Good Samaritan, with Jesus at the cross where he didn't say a word, right? He was being whipped and gouged. Here's the thing. If you read our Constitution and you understand it, we the people, we bear the sword. It's a voting book. So now, it blurs the lines between the personal ethic and the group ethic. Do we bear it for nothing? Are you not going to vote? Are you not going to go out and make known that we have to contain evil and not allow it, not tolerate it to happen? If we do nothing, we're guilty of being a very wicked government indeed. And we are guilty, every one of us in here that's got the ability to vote. In the Great Commission, all authority in heaven and earth is granted to Jesus. All authority in heaven and earth. That's everywhere, right? It's the entire universe. And therefore, he's using his authority and tells us to go make disciples. That's our mission. We're to baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We're to teach them to observe all I commanded. That teaching part is we are to be light and salt to the world. We are to teach the world what a Christian ethic looks like, what the world's supposed to look like in the eyes of God, and not tolerate and sit by and allow evil to happen unabated. Moses Maimonides was an 11th century Jewish rabbi in an occupied Sephardic Jew in Spain. And he wrote extensively about what it was like to live under a Muslim regime. And he talked about the Noahide laws in there. The Noahide laws were ideally in a Jewish-run state. Non-Jews were not expected to live under all of the kosher laws. But they were expected to live according to some basic, a lesser tier group of laws. And that was the minimum for being allowed to live in their culture. Right now, we're witnessing the basic Noahide laws being thrown out. We can't even tell a girl from a boy and what bathroom they're supposed to go in. That's unbelievable to me. Unbelievable. But we are one nation under God. Whether that was in the original Pledge of Allegiance or not. That was how it was conceived. Did I skip one? So now I'm going to talk about the 5 greatest pitfalls of engaging the culture. Now, 7. Oh yeah, right. That was 5. Sorry. Sorry. I did 5, then I realized that 7 was just such a better number, so I had to take that was the last minute change. Sorry about that. 7 is the Hebrew number that's complete, right? When we mention it in the Bible. So I don't make any claims that this is complete, but I thought it was a better number. So here's the 5 greatest holes you're going to fall into when you engage culture. Underestimating the knowledge of those hostile to you, underestimating the hostility born to Christians, overestimating your own knowledge, backing a person or institution instead of standing for truth, underestimating the spiritual nature of the contest, mistaking silence for victory, and treating people with bad ideas as if they're bad people. All of those things we're all guilty of at some point or other, and that's what you really got to be on guard for. So I got some news for you. There's a lot of really smart people out there that know a lot. And they might disagree with you, and they might be wrong. But they have a whole phone book full of facts and information that you probably don't have. The devil is not stupid. He's very smart. You underestimate him at your own risk. There's atheists out there that know the Bible better than you do. And they've studied it for years for the single purpose of catching a Christian unawares and making them question their faith, lose their faith, or just for fun make them look stupid in front of a lot of people. You'll be surprised at where those atheists lurk sometimes. Sometimes they actually pretend like they're Christians. There are people that spend their entire, I already said that. But there are people that spend their entire life studying an issue, and they're experts in that issue. You are not going to walk into a water rights issue or an endangered species issue and make an argument based on the 5-minute special you saw on TV against a PhD that's got their PhD writing a dissertation on that subject. You better check yourself and make sure you're not running into a fight you don't have any ammunition for. And just always remember, you're playing in the devil's playground. This is the contest for worldly power, and if you're not ready for it, you're gonna get beat up. 2, underestimating the hostility. Some of those really smart people absolutely hate anything resembling Christian or faith or Bible or any kind of authority to have over them whatsoever. And they'll say things that will blow your mind. Stuff that I cannot repeat in this room. Especially the internet stuff. People say stuff on the internet that before the internet you'd be out dealing with pistols in the parking lot. And the courage of the keyboard, right? They can hide behind the little keyboard and tap off these horribly wicked things. I've seen it all. I've seen threats for rape, harming your children, hunting you down in your home. I know where you live. I'm going to go kill your dog next time I see you out walking it. People key your car just because you attend a political rally. I mean, I've seen it or heard it, or I mean, it's awful out there. You got to be careful and you got to be ready for it and know what the hot buttons are and not jump into something you're not prepared for. And some of those people carry out their threats to further provoke if you're in the right opportunity. We see it. Who are those crazy people going to presidential rallies and starting fights? I mean, this is like 1930s Germany, guys. This is dangerous, nasty, horrible stuff going on. And there shouldn't be any Christians in those fights, right? We should be the ones trying to create peace. All right. Can you flip that slide around? Try. This one.
This is where we're also supposed to do a head
Yep. Stand on your head.
Can you hit the escape key on the keyboard?
Yep. There we go.
These other ones? Yeah, we're good. There you go.
Okay, overestimating your own knowledge. This one's easy because you think you know something because you did your research, right? Because you talked to your buddy that knows so much. And that person didn't actually even do the first basic Snopes check to see if it was. Who's perpetrated an email they thought sounded true because they wanted to believe it was true, and they sent it out only to find out in basic Snope checks that somebody made it up. It's all a lie.
I get those all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Those tidbits you heard at lunch, they forgot to mention a couple key facts that would change your entire opinion about it. But you went on and paraded it out as if you had first-hand knowledge and argued the fact, and you looked like a complete moron. The great salient point that totally crushes all opposition and ends all arguments, you're more likely to find a unicorn than that. That doesn't exist. So if you think you got one, you need to take a deep breath. You don't. I promise. So I'm just going to keep beating the drum. Do not put your faith in other men or their ideas. Do your own homework. Don't trust anyone, no matter how good-natured or how well-intentioned they might have been. Look at conflicting information. Ask the person that disagrees with them what their opinion is. Find the facts. Get the truth. The truth is your friend, not your enemy. The truth will set you free, right? Be loyal to the truth. Be loyal to God, not to any man-made device or institution. This is kind of repeated. I forgot to take those two last comments out. Not this one. If you're dedicated to truth, you're not going to be threatened when something that you thought was true turned out not to be. It won't upset you. You won't get flustered. You're going to be able to react. Oh, okay. And the more truth you know, the more confident and capable you'll be. You'll be that calm agent in the storm. If you don't know the truth, and you banked on some other information that turns out not to be true, and you put your energy into it, your prize is attached to that. You don't look like a fool, and you're going to be tempted to double down on stupid in a very public way. I've seen it too many times. I've done it myself. Underestimating the spiritual nature of the contest. So Ephesians, everybody knows the putting on the armor of God, but right before that, why do we need to put the armor of God on? So that you'll be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. You guys, we're fighting a battle that we can't see. And when you walk into the environment of politics, you don't know what spiritual battle's going on. You don't. So you have to be on your guard. You got to know what you're doing. And then 1 Corinthians is chapter 1. I love that chapter. And contrast the the wisdom of God versus the wisdom of man. Where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not come to know God. God was well pleased through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believed. For indeed Jews ask for signs and Greeks for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, to Jews a stumbling block and to Gentiles foolishness. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. Because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. Don't be afraid to not win the argument. Sometimes just being peaceful and pleasant wins the day later. You don't look like a, forgive me for saying this, a jackass in public. Sometimes someone's going to feel like they can talk to you. And they might come talk to you personally later on about the real issue of the day. If you come across as intelligent and winning and winsome and gentle and kind and all the things that we want to come across as a Christian, and you could have an argument with someone that absolutely is on the opposite side of the political fence as you in the political environment, and they might come and ask you to go to lunch and say, man, how can you believe all that junk you believe? This is crazy. And guess what you just did? You just opened up an opportunity to save a lost sinner. And you have an opportunity to preach the gospel. Now, is that more important than politics? I think so, right? And you never know, they might change about politics too. So remember, save versus lost. And if you're ever in a public sphere arguing, like on Facebook, a lot of people do that. How many friends do you have? How many friends other people? Do you guys really pay attention to who's reading those posts? Because you have no idea whether something you post that goes on their Facebook page, or they copy and paste it, hey, look at this knucklehead, bro. And it goes off to all their friends, and it goes off in the public sphere, and you're out there associated with some pretty stupid stuff sometimes. I reiterate, the audience is not necessarily who you think it is. The argument you're having might have nothing to do with what's really going on in a spiritual landscape, spiritual warfare context. Mistaking silence for victory. I think we all know this, right? We've probably been on both sides of this one. If someone starts yelling at you, you just shut up. Okay, whatever. Sometimes it happens a little more subtly than that. You don't know. You don't realize it. You think you win the argument because it kind of simmers down and then you move on. Afterwards, I think if you're in the Word and you're praying, God's going to poke you and say, hey, you went too far on that one. But if you're just barreling down the path, going on your agenda and not His, you're going to miss something. You might hurt somebody. You don't even realize it. The words that came out of your mouth might really push somebody away. And you may never have another opportunity to speak truth and love to that person's life that might have needed it. And in that day when we all stand in front of the book of the Lamb, He starts out talking about what we did. We say, hey, this person was ready to hear the message of God. And you wag your finger in their face on that day. Don't forget why we're here. Here's the biggest one I hear, and I cringe every time I hear it. And it happens in a variety of ways. How often do you hear or hear yourself say, those other people from the other political persuasion, they're just stupid, or they're evil? If you've reduced the other person to stupid or evil, you have dehumanized them, and you have removed them from possibility of a rational conversation. And you did it, because you allowed that conversation to happen. You allowed yourself to make them a cardboard cutout in a comic book instead of seeing them as God sees them, as a beautiful creation made in the image of God. And you're not treating them with the dignity and respect they deserve. And we're all guilty. I'm not preaching as like someone who doesn't do this. I'm telling you from experience, and painful experience of being on the wrong side of this thing. Okay. There's a lot of really good people that have really bad ideas. And they're sweet, wonderful people. And there's a lot of them in my family. Yeah.
Go back to the original point, they're not good people. Okay.
That's the tensile dialectic. Yeah. It does. We want to discuss it. Does everybody not follow that?
Nice people.
Yeah, there's a lot of nice people. There's a lot of nice people out there that are, they're not evil, they're not out to get anybody. They just believe what they believe because that's what they grew up believing. I remember talking to one of my cousins, and she's just the sweetest person you ever meet. And I couldn't get anywhere with her. And she says, well, I just don't believe in war. Well, what if somebody attacks us? I just don't believe in war. Okay, well, should we defend? I just don't. She wouldn't even address you. Can't do anything with that. I love you. Give her a hug. I mean, there's nothing you can do. I can't yell at her, right? And she's not done. So don't allow yourself to fall into that trap of demeaning someone down to the evil or stupid, even though it might be true. You might feel that way. Catch yourself. And I would argue that you probably don't have all the information, you don't understand their perspective. And you might not ever understand their perspective, but you still need to treat them with the love and grace that Christ has treated you with. And some of these people might be in your family. You might alienate a few like that. So, closing thoughts. If you're active politically, consider immersing yourself in Scripture during that time. I have a thought. There's about 5 months between now and the election. If you're going to be out there engaging and trying to work for a candidate and try to engage in the events that are going on and work for a proposition that's going to go on a ballot or whatever, I would suggest doing this. I was just doing the numbers. You read one psalm a day, one proverb, one chapter of Acts, one chapter of the Gospel. You're going to get through the entire book of Psalms. You're going to go through Proverbs 5 times. You're going to go through Acts 5 times, and the Gospel is about 1.5 times. If you do that, Jesus will be in your heart and on your mind. And you're going to have a lot better chance of not behaving poorly in the marketplace of ideas. And you might have some insight in a different way. Your default reaction is going to be born from the Holy Spirit and not of your own pride, frustration, anger, whatever. I would encourage anyone engaging to read more political philosophy and history. The culture has distilled everything down that anything that happened more than a few months ago is irrelevant. Well, we got here for a reason, for a really long list of steps that happened to get us here. And we're not going to fix it overnight. We didn't get here overnight. And I mean even before the foundation of this country. Why do we have the ideas? Why do we have the government we have? Learn it, understand it. Read the bad guy stuff. People you disagree with, read what their source material is. Read their own writing. I think you're going to find that what they read amongst their friends and what they tell the outside that they read, it might be two different things. You're also going to find a lot of contradiction, a lot of conflicted souls out there that believe in something because they want it to be true, not because the facts lead them there. And there's a famous quote by, I think it's G.K. Chesterton. I like him, so I'll give him credit. That you're not going to reason somebody out of something they didn't reason themselves into. You're not going to argue with somebody on a core held belief that's filled with emotion and self-identity and the identity of their family and loyalty to all the people they love and everything that they've been up there pounding the table and defending. You're not going to reason them out of it. Even if you're 100% right and you make them look 100% wrong, they're not going to give in. They're just going to get mad at you. So you can't win that way. I really love Genesis 24-32. You guys know the story of Jacob and Esau, right? Jacob was not exactly an admirable guy most of his life, right? And as he's coming back and he's learned all his lessons, and he's struggling with coming back and having to face his brother Esau, which he assumes is going to kill him, he has a night where he wrestles with God down by the river. And God pokes him on the hip and disjoints it, and he forever walk with the wind after that. was marked as Israel after that, right? He changed his name to Israel. If you're not wrestling with God over this complicated, wicked topic, you're not working hard enough. I'm telling you that right now. This is serious business. And if you're not working hard, you need to take a little bit of a breather in the back seat. And I don't mean working hard by studying all the facts and reading the bill that's up for election or the person's speeches. I mean wrestle with God. He wants you to. He wants you to struggle. These are not easy answers. That tensile dialectic is a difficult one. It's very hard to come up with an answer for. I can sit up here and tell you all this stuff and it sounds great, but if you came to me right now with this very specific, what should I do in this political situation? I don't know. I don't have the magic button. It's a wrestle. It's what's your relationship with God and how do you need to behave? Well, you need to be quiet and still enough and filled with enough scripture and the Holy Spirit that you can hear what He's got to say to you. And if you're not, you're going to have trouble. Don't be on a team. Don't pick a team first and then figure out what they believe. Okay? Don't blindly jump into the fray without knowing which guys you should be swinging against. Because some of the people on your team might be bad guys. And it might surprise you which ones. I'll rephrase that. It will surprise you which ones are the bad guys. Know why you're on the team and make sure you're on the right team. You live in a free country. Exercise it. Get the ring out of your nose. So here's a reading list, and I forgot a couple, but I didn't want to put any stuff up in here that I haven't read. So these are some of the stuff that I've read. There's a bunch more out there that look really good. There's a bunch I have on my bookshelf, but I haven't read them. But expand and give yourself a broader vision of the world around you. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of different ways of looking at the world. And there's a lot of people out there that read these things. And if you know what's in them, you might have something intelligent to say about it, and you might appreciate where they're coming from and anticipate their argument better. You might even change your opinion about a couple of things. You notice the Bible's not in first and last, right? You can see.
You wrote the Bible twice?
Yeah. Right? Did I mention you should be reading the Bible once or twice?
You don't have a copy of that, but yeah, that would be.
Sure, I can do something. I don't have a hard copy right now.
This is all taken.
So I haven't. Yeah, that's it. So I can briefly talk about a couple of these things, why I put them on here. I think Mere Christianity is a great book to read and reread. Read it once a year, once every other year. It's a quick read. It'll remind you of how we're supposed to think, see the world, and behave. In surprising ways, every time I read it, it shows me something new. Art of War, Sun Tzu. Anybody heard of that book? It's easy read. It's like lots of little vignettes from an ancient 3rd century BC Chinese war general. And back in those days, the Chinese war generals were kind of like NFL football coaches. They moved from team to team every once in a while. And he was the best one of all, and everybody tried to compete for hiring him. And he's got a lot of very priceless pieces of wisdom about how to choose the battlefield and when not to engage and when to engage and how to win the battle before it starts. And while he's literally speaking of swords and spears and chariots and whatnot, there is a eternal truth to the truisms in what he writes that help inform the way you think about the strategy. Because like I said, politics is the field of contest for worldly power. You need to know what's happening. You might not be engaged in the battle, but there's a battle going about. You need to know how to duck, right? The Prince, Niccolo Machiavelli. This is a guy that worked for the Medicis in medieval Renaissance Italy, and he was wishing for a prince that was so ruthless that he could come in, wipe out all opposition, and start over. And when you hear the Machiavellian schemes, we're referring to this. Everybody's heard Machiavellian schemes, right? Well, they're referring to the prince, Niccolo Machiavelli. He basically said when the new prince comes in, he's not only going to defeat his opponent, he's going to kill him, and he's going to kill his wife and his sister and his brother. And this is the Mafia's manifesto. But there is a lot more to it than just that, and it's worth reading because it informs most of our politicos out there right now. And you see it happening proverbially in the marketplace right now. You see a politician and they stub their toe, and they are punished to the nth degree so that they will never have a political career again. Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Anybody read it? If you haven't, you should. And you're going to have all these like Harvard intellectuals say, well, you can't really understand it because it's really complicated. It's not. It's written for children. It's the most asinine, idiotic book you've ever read. But it'll tell you, inform you what you're up against. Or hopefully you're against. Rules for Radicals, Saul Alinsky. Don't eat before you read it. You'll vomit. The book is dedicated to the devil at the beginning of the book. And I don't think, for instance, that Saul Alinsky was a devil worshiper. I think he was an atheist. He didn't believe in anything. He didn't take it seriously. So he thought it was cute that he dedicated it to the devil at the beginning. But he literally, it's dedicated to the devil in the very first opening of the book. And the problem was is that he might have thought he was joking, but I don't think he was. I think he was working for the wrong team. Biographies of founding fathers are awesome. There's a bunch of them out there. And there's a bunch of them written with the purpose of celebrating them. There's a bunch written with the purpose of tearing them down. Read one of each. Pick one. Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu, it's Eastern philosophy, it's Chinese philosophy, and it's again little teeny short snippets of wisdom from an Eastern perspective. It's not a religion, but it's an interesting piece of wisdom from a different perspective that will get you sideways. And you'd be surprised at how many of those things you can find biblical reference to. Yeah.
I just had a question. It's interesting how it's backing up to the Rules for Radicals and biographies of the founding fathers, having those next to each other. They're polar opposites, really. And
Well, how do you think I came with the list?
yeah, well, right. That's how your mind works. Is
Yeah.
But the funny thing is we're facing now. I mean, our country was founded on geopolitical principles, right? Our rights are endowed by our Creator,
Yep.
and the logic flows from that starting point.
Absolutely.
So, really, even absent Christianity, let's say it's false. We could look at the logic and the practical outworkings of it being a better system than taking God out. So, in other words, you can't ground your. It's like what Nietzsche said: without God, everything goes. So, it's better from a practical standpoint. We could be arguing in a secular argument. We are rejecting God, which this country was founded on, believe it or not, to the skeptics, but it works. So you take God out and we're seeing what's happening. Everything goes. So that's why the Rules for Radicals is so obscene, I think. And the founding fathers work even if they're Buddhists.
Right.
Not all of them, but possibly.
Book of Five Rings. Anybody know who Miyamoto Musashi is? Am I only? So he was the greatest swordsman that ever lived in Japan. And he wrote a book called The Book of Five Rings, and it's mostly about his life and how he grew up as a swordsman and defeating everyone in single combat. And his strategy for sizing an opponent up and how to pick the right ground, it's kind of like Sun Tzu for the individual. Sun Tzu is for commanding armies. Book of Five Rings is for individual tactics and how to defeat your opponent. It's pretty interesting stuff. Confucius. You can read a lot of his writings and come and start thinking, maybe, yeah, this guy might be a Christian. He's got a lot of good stuff in there. Plato's Republic. If you're thinking politics in this country, read the Constitution, please, twice, 3 times.
There's an ad.
Yeah, it's 17 pages, people. It's not hard. It's really short. Doesn't take long. Federalist Papers take a lot longer, but if you want to know what it actually means and not what everybody's telling you that it means, read the Federalist Papers, because that's where they argue for every clause and every component of it. Read it.
Any recommendations of specific?
No, that depends on the topic. But yeah, but you can You can find web pages that'll tell you, based on topic, which one to read. Like Federalist Papers 39 or whatever it is. You can go, roll number. It used to be required reading for every law student in America because you can't understand the Constitution without it. Now, they don't, not only not required, they don't even talk about it. How can you understand the original intent of the Constitution if you don't read the writings of the people that wrote it and told you what it meant?
Hillsdale College has got a free course on the
They do.
Constitution, and C.S. Lewis. And
Yep, yeah, Hillsdale College is wonderful. Anybody read Common Sense by Thomas Paine? Did anybody read it in school and got the one paragraph version? Yeah. And didn't realize it was like an entire book almost, it was a gigantic pamphlet. Does anybody know the history of Common Sense? Common Sense was written in January of 1776. In 6 months, it transformed the entire colonial Americas with printing presses that had to be set up letter by letter and hand. It took them by firestorms. It was literally the most successful political pamphlet ever written. And if I had to sum it up in one phrase, it was a biblical tract against the divine right of king's philosophy. It was a shot across the bow to every monarch in Europe. And it took America by firestorm. Read it. Read the whole thing. It's a book based on the book of Samuel and how God did not want them to choose a king when they demanded the king. No, we want a king. We want a... Completely undermined it. And people today are saying, oh, Thomas Paine was an atheist. He didn't like organized religion. He had a lot of bad things to say about the churches because the churches were corrupt. And even if he was an atheist, he wrote a great biblical argument. Anybody read the 1936 Soviet Constitution?
Missed it.
Did you know that it's a constitutional right in the 1936 Soviet Constitution for you to have a job and have health care? So when people start talking, I have a right to health care, they're not reading the right Constitution, people. They're reading the Communist Constitution from the Soviet Union in 1936. You can't get trapped up in bogus arguments. Anybody read the 1922 party platform of the National Socialist Workers' Party in Germany? Does anybody know the other more common name for the National Socialist Workers' Party?
Nazi.
It was the Nazi Party, yeah, absolutely. Read the party platform. Minus the let's kill all the Jews, it's the Democratic Party platform of the United States right now. It's almost identical. Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. Great read. He didn't finish it. He died before it finished. It takes him up to about the age of 55 or so. He's in France and that. But it is a great vision of what this country was like before it was a country. It was so colonial, and as it became, before we got embroiled in the politics of the day. It sets the tone and gets you an understanding of why some of the things happen. Confessions, St. Augustine. Anybody read that? If that doesn't crush you, you didn't read it slow enough. It'll make you feel about this small.
The thing about the 1922 party platform is, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Hitler kind of explain a lot of the mechanics behind what that agenda was in Mein Kampf when he was talking about specifically outing the Jews in the Weimar Republic?
Yeah, my understanding is that's true, but I haven't read Mein Kampf, so like I said, I don't know anything up here that I haven't read myself. I think there's probably some education to be had reading Mein Kampf, but I haven't read it. But anyway, that's my readings. I thought of one after I left, and
I have a question.
yeah.
Talk a little bit more about why the Confessions of St. Augustine would crush us, please.
Well, he starts confessing his sin from infancy. And he starts recognizing in every which way that he sins against God. And it convicts you. You realize how sinful we are, and we don't even realize it. We convince ourselves that we're good people. I'm a Christian, I go to church, I do.
And he was looking back,
Oh, he's looking back? Oh, yeah. No, it's very convicting. It's very convicting. And it will humble you. And from humility, you can accept the wisdom and grace of God and actually act in that and maybe hear the Holy Spirit. When you're ball fisted and pounding on a table, you're not going to hear that. So I think it's a very good thing to read and have, it'll change you. If you haven't read it, it'll change the way you see the world and yourself.
Thanks a lot for a summer reading list.
I got 3 more I thought of this morning.
How
It's all
about
real
that?
life material too.
Yeah.
So it's all like,
How about the Koran? Would you put that on there?
yeah, you could read the Quran. That'd be good. I didn't go into the Muslim stuff. There's a lot about Islam that we should probably educate ourselves about and not buy into the hyperbole.
Well, unless you're gonna learn Arabic, all of the English language versions are all Hebrew, so you're not gonna get.
Yeah, but most Muslims don't read it in Arabic either, and they have a very poor understanding of their own text. So engaging in the Muslim world is a whole different topic that I'm not prepared for today. But just on our subject of our politics today, I would throw in also the 5,000-Year Leap by Cleon Skousen, Good and Faithful Servant by Hugh Hewitt, and Politics According to the Bible by Wayne Grudem. And those are all, I think some of you might already be familiar with those. But anyway, anybody got any more questions? I'm done.
Just a comment on Augustine.
Mhm.
His mother prayed for him, being a faithful mother.
And he needed it.
You needed
And
it.
then he Yep.
Amen.
Thanks, Dave. Well, yeah, this is stuff that's convicting me, as I said, and it's going to be immediately applicable. I'm going to speak to a group of Hispanic, Spanish-only speaking pastors June 9th. I've been invited to this group where they're like super fired up. And I don't speak Spanish. It's all going to be through a translator. But they are really fired up because they had a talk similar to this, but from a different angle. So it really fired them up on all this stuff, the crazy policies that are out there, the godless politics. And so they're really hungry for Constitution classes and really going out to get the world. But my message to them, and the title is going to be Evangelizing in the 21st Century. We're sharing the gospel in the 21st century. And I want to bring them back home to their number one priority. First, the relationship with God. Second, their family. Third, their church life. And then the world. So back it up, because what's happening is it's penetrating into the church where we have our foundations in the truth of God. And if it falls apart within and it decays within, then, we need to protect that before we point at what's happening in the world, right? So that's another takeaway for me for this. I like what Pastor Gino said last week at his sermon is we don't look to people, and we don't teach our kids in school to look at Daniel, David, at Jacob and others because that's our role model. They screwed up too. They did human things. We look to our God, and that's our so I want to make a couple announcements because people tend to trickle in. It's a 9 o'clock class in the morning, so I want to make sure that we get caught up a little bit. I'm hearing that there's a new summer schedule. Todd, is that right? That's official?
June and July.
So June and July, if you haven't heard yet, there's not the 9/11. It's just 10 o'clock for those 2 months, right? June and July. So that impacts us a little bit. That's going to really scrunch our time. I had an atheist coming in June, but I just called him to bump it to August because we want him to really be able to flesh out his ideas and then the next week dissect those ideas. And so that's going to be August 14th. For June, I want to tackle a topic. It's going to be tough, so I need lots of prayer. We talked a few months ago on what the Bible says about homosexuality. Now, what's the big topic? Transgender, but still it's the LGBT in general, right? I want to have a talk and a discussion on
That's
how
actually
we,
incorrect. It's LGBTQ
right, yeah.
something.
There's a couple
Yes.
other letters you can tack on, right? But how, because we can't avoid it. This isn't our fight we're bringing up. This is not something that we want to talk about. Nobody does. Often people on both sides are uncomfortable. How do we? How do we carry on the conversation when it's thrown in our face? There's something that we're not going looking for. How do we respond? Because Christians commonly, not necessarily in this church, maybe in this church, are not equipped to hear it. It's not necessarily appropriate always to be on the sermon talking about this stuff. Pastor Gino's job is to teach the Word, get into the Bible. So we're caught flat-footed, and what do we say? Number one, we love people. It's not easy, and we don't want to, right? People we disagree with. So how do we respond? What do we say? And how do we love those people that are naturally tough to love? Everybody we disagree with is tough to love sometimes. So that's what I want to tackle on June 12th instead of the atheist.
So the
We only
10
have
o'clock
50
thing
minutes,
is-
though.
Is like one service, like it's only one service?
Yeah, one service 10, I think 10 to 11:30.
Okay.
So we're going to be like 9 to 9:50, so we're going to cram it really in, but I think it's important. If you don't have emails, I send out emails to let you know what the next topic is, or if you don't want to be on the emails, let me know. We have a Facebook group page. If you have other stuff that you're hearing about in the schools, at work, in your world that you want addressed, you're not being adequately equipped to handle, comment there, email me, let me know, because I want to keep this class relevant, because there's stuff thrown at us all the time. We want to be good representatives of Christ, right? I'm going to try also to have interviews, maybe like a FaceTime or what's the other one, Skype type of thing, with skeptics, people of other faiths, maybe homosexuality and transgenders, so we can talk to them for a couple minutes before we get into it. Who knows a transgender person? You? That is way beyond the odds because they're very, very few of them. But the topic is everywhere, right? So hopefully we'll be able to meet them. I'll try. And so that's what we got in store. It's going to be June and July for that, just 9 to 9:50. And keep in touch with me online and check out for updates on Facebook. Let's just close in prayer. Father, we come humbly to you. We often get up on our high horse because it is so easy to be an expert at the water cooler. But let us remember you when we're wearing that cross around our neck, or whether we proclaim to be Christians. Let us also remember to be good ambassadors, because people are listening, whether we know it or not. And you always are listening. Father, equip us, give us the opportunity to bring people to the cross, and also build up our fellow believers. In Jesus' name.